All right, so there's a story I want to talk about. This is a story from the New York Post, and it's entitled Mental Toughness Campaign is Just Toxic Masculinity Rebranded, journalist says. And now what it's specifically referring to here is a journalist named Jill Stark. And she's essentially going after toxic masculinity. The person she's chosen, I think, she chose the wrong person. And you can disagree with people and their methods in terms of like what they're using to improve their mental health, but you don't go after people that are trying to raise money. So this guy, Nedd Brockman, he set out to beat the world record for how quickly you can run 1,600 kilometers or 1,000 meters. And he basically just ran laps around a track the entire time. Brutal. If you've ever done any sort of longer runs at a track, you know that is a mind fuck. It sucks. Like there's something nice about having a longer trail to run on, and it's just like new scenery, there's trees and all that stuff. Staying on a track and just doing 4 loops for each mile, it sucks. It can really get to you, and the mental game there is very hard. But so he was aiming to beat the world record of 10 days, 10 hours and 30 minutes. And he ended up doing it in 12 days, 13 hours and 16 minutes. Either way, awesome attempt. And through that process raised there's different estimates, but anywhere from 2.6 to $4.8 million. So like very noble thing, very cool thing, difficult thing. And here you have this journalist, Jill Stark, talking about, she argues this trend represents the blokeification of mental fitness and is essentially toxic masculinity rebranded. She expresses discomfort with the philosophy behind the campaign, questioning the message of what it means to be mentally strong, self-care versus self-punishment. It's a uniquely masculine approach to well-being that is less self-care and more self-flagellations. So this is where I think this is the internet as a whole. Everyone pretends like their approach is the best approach. There's only one approach and everyone should do that one approach. And I think if people like Andrew Tate, Jordan Peterson, now I know those two are dramatically different, right, in their philosophies, but these characters that have gained major prominence have saved millions. I'm going to just stick with men here, millions of men's lives. I know Jordan Peterson saved my life personally. I was not in a good spot. And when I discovered him years and years and years ago, it completely turned my life around. And I think you need to understand that different people are helped by different things. You can't just force everyone to do therapy. Therapy doesn't work for everything. And as a matter of fact, I don't know how many of you out there have heard about the replication crisis, but there is indeed a replication crisis. So when you have studies, you want to be able to replicate them. You should be able to go back to the data and do that same thing and get a similar, it doesn't have to be exactly the same, but a very similar result. So there was something called the Reproducibility Project in 2015. And they attempted to replicate 100 psychology studies, and only 36% of them produced results similar to the original findings. That's crazy. So 64% of them were not able to be replicated. So to me, you're like forcing people in this lane that you think is like the end all be all of mental wellness. Whereas there are people that just need to get out of their head and into their body. And that's how it helps them. I think that's like the mechanism of action there. So some people are just so in their head all the time that they can't, they aren't even aware of their body. Like I'm sure all of you know the person that's constantly stubbing their toe, constantly running into things, tripping over themselves. Like I bet you that person has a crazy brain. Like that person is probably thinking about 6, 7, 8 different things at any given moment. They're just not able to get out of here and focus on what their feet are doing. And so I think like fitness has been a game changer for so many people as a means of helping them, helping their mental health. So she goes on to bash performative suffering, the notion that the more grueling the challenge and the more performative the suffering, the more psychologically robust you are. And she says that's problematic to hear. But isn't that true? I mean, if you can bite down and get through something very difficult physically, then you can do it mentally. And in fact, that is like for endurance sports, for endurance athletes, it is a mental game. It is mental toughness. Like you have to be able to bypass your own psychology, your own physiology, sending all of these signals trying to tell you to stop. And you have to get through that. You have to say, no, actually, I'm in control and I can decide whether or not I'm going to keep going or not. And so like, to me, like I was thinking about this the other day. I went on my run. It was very cold. This was last weekend. And I just did like a short 6 mile tempo run, and it was very cold. It's 22 degrees. And I had layers, but I didn't have enough. I didn't really think, because it had been a long time. I'm in North Carolina, so it's not very often that it gets that cold down here and I have to run in it. And so just unprepared, I didn't have as many layers on as I should have. And so I finished my run, and I finished out a little bit further than I normally do. So I had to walk back home. And, after a run, even though it's cold, you're still sweating. So my clothes inside of my hoodie were still soaked. And so here I am walking. It was really windy that day too. So I'm walking into the wind, got a gnarly headwind. My clothes are wet, and it just sucked. It was really bad. And about halfway through it, like I could tell that I was like seizing up more and more and more as I was walking longer, and I wasn't running anymore. So my body heat was coming back down. And I just decided in that moment, like I went back to all the things I've learned about meditation, which I've been meditating for a really long time, and I've learned a lot, I've read a lot of books, and there is a choice in all areas. Now, this might seem brutal and it might seem discompassionate, but there is a choice. Now, I know there are people that have chemical reactions or chemical imbalances due to whatever reason. I'm not here to say that people don't have chemical imbalances, and I'm not here to say that like, oh, fitness or anything is the cure to your chemical imbalance, although it can be. But what I will say is that about midway through that walk home, I made a decision. I started observing myself, and I noticed that as I was focusing on the suffering was getting worse. And I made a decision right then and there that my brain was separate from my body. No matter how my body feels, I don't have to, act the same way that my body feels. And so I took some deep breaths. I calmed right down. I relaxed my face, and I walked with a smile. And instantly, my body felt so much better. It was still cold, for sure. Absolutely, it was still cold. But it wasn't near what it had been only moments ago. And then the rest of my walk home was actually pretty pleasant. I was able to focus on the fact that the sun was out, even though it was ridiculously cold. Where I live, there's trees everywhere, so it was just beautiful. It was just a beautiful morning. And I was able to take that in, as opposed to like staring at the ground and just trudging home and just freezing my balls off, So that was the decision. And that's very similar to the sorts of decisions that endurance athletes have to make. And that's a skill that can be nurtured. And the better you get at that skill, you can apply that to different parts of your life. Like if you go through something really difficult mentally with a friend, a loved one, what have you, a coworker, anything, you're able to take a step back, observe yourself, understand what your body is feeling, understand your emotional state, and interject and make a choice. And I think that is the power of all of this. That's the power of exercise. That's the power of endurance. It's you are enduring, you are making an active choice to endure through it. So I think people like this, Jill Stark, look, if therapy, just copious amounts of therapy and just talking about your feelings incessantly and focusing on your state, your feeling, the way that you're feeling, if that helps you, great. It doesn't help people like me and millions of other people. I can't just sit here and focus on how I feel because I got fucking work to do, right? We all have work to do. So if I'm just sitting here, I'm like, oh, I'm going to take a day off. I'm going to go lay in my bed and just be depressed and self-care. No, those kettlebells on the floor, that's self-care. Making the decision to get up out of bed, no matter how I feel, making the choice, going to those kettlebells, doing the work, or going to the gym, or heading outside when it's 22 degrees outside and getting the run done anyway. That is self-care. And building up that resilience, because that's what it is. It's resilience. If I can make my choice to actually go out there and suffer, and everyone has their amounts that they can handle. No shot I'm doing what this guy did. Like, I'm not an ultra runner. I respect ultra runners. I think they're incredible people. Some of the most chill, down to earth people I've ever met. But they're making a choice to suffer. And I bet your ass that that choice to suffer is improving other areas of their life where they're able to make the choice, no matter how intimidating the thing or no matter how the thing feels to them. So, yeah, I mean, we'll go on just a little bit more, but these activities are seen as attempts at self-improvement, but start questions whether they are genuinely beneficial for mental health. Like, what? What are you talking about here? I don't understand. Concern about messaging. Stark is disturbed by this modern brand of male wellness because it emphasizes resilience through punishment rather than care. So what type of care? Like, again, it goes back to, like, you just want to stew on it and yeah, okay, you can talk about it. That's fine. In a lot of like running groups and workout groups, people talk. One of the things about men, and I can't remember where I heard this from, but they were talking about how there's therapy groups popping up where instead of men just sitting around and talking, men sit around and do something. They might build a shed or they might just put something together. And while they're doing that, they're talking about their feelings and they're getting amazing results from that. I'm going to have to look that up and I'll talk about it on a podcast episode. But that's exactly what it is. Like me personally, I meet people. I go through running groups and I'll work out with different people. And through that, you end up talking, right? You get close with these people. You keep seeing them. And I think that's the point of it. People need friends. They need friends. They need people to do stuff with. But it says balance needed. Stark suggests promoting mental fitness should involve self-awareness and care, not just pushing limits. Who is promoting just pushing limits, right? Like, I don't think anyone is. I don't think there's anyone out there like, oh, you should not talk about anything. You should never do therapy. You should just work out, just run, just work through it, and you'll feel better. Like, no one is saying that. I think most people, I would venture to guess all people that are prominent in the podcast space and the YouTube space are, except for like people like Andrew Tate, they have a balanced view. And if she can't find those people, then she needs to change her echo chamber because clearly she's only being exposed to things that make her feel otherwise. But I don't know. This was a really frustrating thing to get through, a really frustrating article because, I mean, I respect what he did. I mean, Nedd Brockman is a stud and the amount of money that he raised, what? I mean, if some of these are correct, I mean, up to $4.8 million raised for homeless people, that's insane. So this journalist can get screwed, not like, you know what I mean? But hey, I think we all need to go to Nedd's page and thank him for what he did and, support him more. And I really hope that it seems like a tide has turned recently. And I hope that journalists like Jill don't get attention anymore. I mean, I hope people just ignore people like this because clearly their approach didn't work, right? Like there is a crisis among men, a loneliness epidemic. Men are, unaliving themselves at rates that we've rarely seen. And it's because we're constantly pushing to them that, oh, you need to talk and you need to focus on your feelings and this is that and the third. It's like, no, you need to get to work and like do something, put yourself through something. And through that, you become a more durable person. And along the way, meet friends, talk with your friends, share your feelings. I talk to my guys every week. I have many guy friends that I talk to on the phone, some of them multiple times a week. And that's cathartic for me, and none of us are like, it's not like a therapy. It's not like an intended therapy session, but we just end up talking about what's going on in our lives. What are you up to? What are you working on? What kind of problems are you having? Those things just inevitably end up coming out and we just end up supporting each other. And that's what men need. Men need men, to put it bluntly. But anyways, that's it for me. Hope you all have a good night. See you at the next one.